In the Old Testament, the Hebrew midwives would lie to the Egyptians to protect the newborn males, and God rewarded them for that. So where does the means justify the ends?
That's a good question. You didn't tell me you were going to ask that one. He usually tips me off. Okay. Midwives lie. He said the ends justify means. What it's called in theology is called situational ethics. Or, if any of you are from Roman Catholic background, Jesuit casuistry. The idea that that you, for the sake of good, can lie. So let's first look at what he's talking about. Look in Exodus. Since we only have 2 questions, I have to go a long time on this one. Where are all these people moaning that I never answer their questions? I don't even see them. I'm teasing. Okay, let's see, the midwives, chapter 2, chapter 1, verse 19, and backing up. In verse 11, the taskmasters. Verse 12, they're more afflicted, they're growing. Verse 14, their lives are bitter. And then verse 16, Pharaoh actually says, if it's a son, kill him. If it's a daughter, she shall live. But, verse 17, the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded, but saved the male children alive. And then the king of Egypt called for the midwives, verse 18 of Exodus 1, and said, why have you done this, and saved the male children? And the midwives said, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, they are lively, they give birth before the midwives come. Therefore, God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very mightily. And so it was, because the midwives feared God, he provided households for them. By the way, where did it say that they lied? Which verse does it say? Let's see. Does it actually say they lied, John? Or have you heard that all your life? Well, actually, I mean, it's implied, and I've always heard all my life that they lied, but it really doesn't, it doesn't, in these verses, say that they lied. They just said that the Hebrew women give birth before we get there. Now, basically, there are many views. Okay, number one, if they lied, why did God bless them? I'll answer that first. God did not bless them for lying. God blessed them for fearing him and for not murdering children. And you can, in the literature on this, it's possible that instead of lying, that the midwives tipped them off and said, we're coming, and if the baby is born when I'm there, the Pharaoh wants him killed, and so if they're born, I can't wrestle them out of your arms and throw them into the Nile River and drown them. So it could be that they tipped them off. But if they did lie, does God honor lying? No. God is immutable. So number one, lying is always sin. Always sin. God is not a situational ethicist. The Jesuit priests, they're the kind of the special forces of the Pope. They are known for their casuistic. It's kind of like the same thing we see in Islam. It says actually in the Quran that if you're being defeated, then call for a little truce so that you can rearm and kill them, go back and win. And it's this idea that you do whatever it takes to accomplish your goal. That is not what God says. The ends do not justify the means. You don't change your ethics by situations. Jesuistic lying is wrong. And if the midwives lied, and in the New Testament's comments on this whole period of time is where this notion comes from. So let's talk about if they lied, they sinned, even though what's interesting is the 10 Commandments about not lying are not written for quite a while after this, about 80 years later, that we have the whole giving of the 10 Commandments. So there is not a commandment that is written down by God that says don't lie. That comes in chapter 20. But it's still a moral that their conscience would have convicted them on. And so probably one thing is they were so convicted they felt that murder was worse than lying, and so they lied so they didn't have to murder. The second thing is that they were deceptive, and they tipped off the mothers to, have the baby yourself so it'll survive. And that brings us to this whole situational ethics. My personal, I'll give an anecdotal before I comment on it. When I traveled behind the Iron Curtain in the 70s and smuggled Bibles, I guess if you smuggle, that means that you're hiding something. And so we believed that because the communist officials said that it was wrong for people to have Bibles, that it was okay for us to take them Bibles against the law, but our mission, we said we would never lie. Now, when I was doing this from 1977 through 1979, during that time period, there were 40 missions that were delivering Bibles into Eastern Europe. And as far as I know, because I was at a conference with all of them gathered, only 2 of them had this philosophy: no lying. All the rest of the missions had training for the college students, how to look a Soviet guard in the eye and not flinch and lie to him. And you practiced. They come up and say, "Do you have Bibles?" You go, "No, Bibles? Are you kidding?" Sound like Peter in Caiaphas' courtyard, and you cuss and swear and kick a little bit and say, "Are you kidding? I don't, nothing to do with Bibles," even though you had a carload of them. And they actually trained them in that. I thought, well, what happens when you get back home and you don't like the government and you don't want to pay taxes? Did you earn money? Are you kidding? I don't earn any money. I'm not going to pay tax on that. I mean, when do you stop all this? I mean, you can have your situational ethics. You can have a different ethic for a different situation, and you can become very hardened by that. In fact, it's deceptive. You can learn to deceive people, to make them think what you want them to think. And the turning point for me was our largest trip. I mean, I had already decided I wasn't going to lie, but I hadn't really thought about it as deeply until we got to northern Africa. And in Morocco, in that time period, they had tanneries where they had no mechanization. Humans tanned animal hides. If you know anything about tanning, it's successions of baths of alkaline, very strong agents that you would put this plywood piece of camel hide that was stiff as a board into it, and the men would jump up and down on these hard skins until they softened up, and then they'd throw them over the wall into the next pool where others were doing something else, jumping up and down on them. They'd throw them over the wall into the next pool. These were human agitators. They were in this strong solution that was tanning leather hides. They were, instead of having any machinery in Morocco, they had people. And these guys just wore these little shorts, no shirt, no pants, and they were just all day long kind of doing water aerobics. Well, we took a tour of the tannery. And one of those men, can you imagine doing water aerobics all day, the muscles you'd have in your legs? And one of the men was standing there while we were eating couscous, which is the local Moroccan food. And he was standing by me, and I said, excuse me. I said, could you ask him, I have a question. Can I touch your leg? Because I wanted to see what the skin was like for someone that spent their lifetime in an agent that softened hard board-like leather and softened it because it was such strong chemicals. I wanted to see what the softener did to his soft skin. And the skin of those leather people was like naugahyde, or you can think of anything you want. It was plastic. It had changed their skin into hardness. I don't know their life expectancy, but what I thought about is a person who is deceptive, they are, through their, willing to say whatever needs to happen, they're trying to soften the blow of if they were caught by their deception. But just like in the leather factory, the softening agent hardened them. What I've seen is people that learn to not tell the truth in one setting. I had a student when I was high school youth pastor, kind of like Jordan or Justin and Jeremy are, and Jordan was, whose father worked for the CIA. And this boy grew up. Every time they answered the phone, they never said whose residence it was. They just said, hello. And the person would say, I want Mr. Smith. And they'd say, just a minute. And they'd hand the phone to their dad. And their dad was Mr. Smith. The next day they'd answer the phone. They'd say, I want Mr. Miller. And Mr. Miller was the next day. This boy grew up with a father that he never knew who he was, and the mother never knew where he was. And he never, because he was a spy, he never told anybody anything that was exactly what was going on. And when that boy was in my youth group, he says, and you know what? He said, my dad didn't keep his word with us. He had a woman in every port, Now, I know not all CIA agents are like that, but what I say is, be careful of deception. So, back to John. See, now that was a rabbit trail. Did they lie? In Exodus, it doesn't say they lied. In the New Testament, it infers that there was something going on that was happening in this time that has been this classic, they lied. Why did God bless them? Number one, the reason that the commentators would say is that there was not yet the written law. Number two, they were in a pagan society and did not have the, Judeo, as it is, ethics there. And number three, because life was more important than, the truthfulness. So the lie was a lesser evil than this. And this is why, for example, Corrie ten Boom and, all of that about hiding the Jews and everything else. Now back to us. So we smuggling Bibles, had to go through the same communist borders. And what our mission said is, if you tell the truth and you get caught, then you go to jail. And that's the price you pay to be on our mission. All the other students wanted the excitement of going on the mission, but they didn't want to ruin their fall college, so they lied so they wouldn't get caught, so they could go back to school in September. But what they told us was that if you're on this mission and the Lord called you, that you shouldn't lie, and if He wants you to get through the border, they'll never ask you. And so our team actually took over 50,000, probably more like 150,000 Bibles in, and no one ever asked us once. And we took them into Muslim countries. We took them by the trailer load. We took travel trailers behind us, stacked to the ceilings. And we watched the Lord do the most amazing things. We would drive in. You ever crossed into a Muslim or a communist country? You wait in line 5 or 6 hours at the border. You think Canada's bad or Mexico? 6 hours. They take the car, everyone gets out, they take the mats out, they unbolt the seats, they take everything out of the trunk, they take the liner out of the trunk. Another guy's got a long metal thing. He's fishing in the gas tank to see if you got anything floating in there. Hood's up. A guy is on one of those roller things, that you lay on and go underneath the car, and he's clunking and tapping under there, looking to see if there's a false bottom on the car. Other people are walking around the car going, looking for hollow places, and you sit in your car for 6 hours, and you edge forward car by car. And when they find something, you see them drag the people off. So it's quite an exciting, dramatic thing to sit there and have people behind you and knowing your turn is coming. And we did that month after month. And every time we got up, the people would get in our car, and they'd start talking to us and ask us about America or whatever. And They wouldn't thump anything. They never took the mats out. Or other times, it was the changing of the guard. And no one wants to work overtime because everyone got paid the same in a communist country, so why would you want to work overtime and not get double in time and a half? And so it would just work out. The Lord would time. What I'm saying is the Lord always honored the no-lie teams. We never had one team ever caught. And we would run like this. But the lie teams, they were imprisoned in Bratislava, they were imprisoned in Brno, they were imprisoned in whatever, because they would say, I don't have anything, and they'd thump their car, and they'd say, well, what is that? And then they would bring out their Sawzall, and they go, and, oh, how did those get in there? Bibles. I don't believe in Bibles. So it's just interesting to me. That's anecdotal. There's no verse and reference for it. But I will say, I saw the Lord honoring, because I do live after I know, the thou shalt not bear false witness. I know that God is a God of truth. And I know that if he called me, that I don't have to lie for him, that he would find another way. And to make a long story short, I even remember once that I was trying to get out of the car that was going into a Muslim country, and we had 6,000 Bibles for Transworld Radio, hand addressed with every Muslim that ever had responded to Christian radio. Their name and address was written on a paper cover of a Bible ready to mail. That was the most important trip we ever took, 6,000 of them. If they'd have caught us, they would have had the name and address of everyone in all 20, however Muslim nations there are, that had listened to Transworld Radio. And I watched them take all the cars apart in front of us. We had a trailer filled with 6,000 Bibles. I drove up. I was the driver. And I had the passports in my hand, and I was opening the door, and I couldn't get it open. I kept going like this. You know how in Michigan it rusts, I was used to that, and I was pushing on it, and I looked down, and the Muslim guard, the Moroccan guard, had his knee against my door. And we were going back and forth, him pushing, me pushing, and he was looking at the clock, like I am right now, hoping to run it out so we don't have any more hard questions. And he was watching for quitting time. And as soon as it went, he pushed the passports back in and he said, go, go. And we roared through that border with our trailer and our 6,000 Bibles and all of the sweaty college students that were ready to go to Muslim jail. And we said, God is able to do exceedingly, what we thought we were planning to go to jail. And what the Lord wanted to show us is that in that circumstance, his will for us was that we not get caught. And he did many other incredible things. So John, the short answer is the Lord didn't bless them for lying. If they deceived, he blessed them for preserving life. But God never blesses sin. God forgives sins. He doesn't bless us for disobeying his moral law and his revealed will. But he does overlook. And those women, the Lord blessed them for preserving the life of those male Hebrew children. And beware of anybody that teaches that you can have one ethic in one place and another ethic in another, because what it will do to you is what it did to the Moroccan leather workers. It makes you calloused to the truth. And as you're listening to someone, you decide how much truth you're going to tell them, and then you can't remember the last lie, so you have to tell another lie to cover the last lie, and it becomes like the drama we see in our political system nowadays.